Welcome back, my loves. Today I want to talk to you about marriage or the spouse in astrology. So I want to be clear, even though we are talking about marriage as a label or the spouse as a label, this does not necessarily mean that the person will get married, right? It is possible that this could be talking about that individual's long-term partner, especially as we move into this era where, I don't know about you, tons of people are not getting married, right? Tons of people opt to have more of an unconventional type of arrangement. And that's the direction that I think we are very much moving towards. So with that being said, please understand I'm saying marriage and spouse as a label for that person's long-term partner. The other thing that I want to say is that equally, I know people that have maybe gotten married for a green card or something like that. And in that case, it does not usually represent the seventh house, okay? Or it can, but in terms of looking at who that person's long-term partnership is, there is the ninth house represents the second marriage. So let's say I had a client that got married for a green card or something. I would still look at their seventh house, right? I would check in with the seventh house and see what was going on there. And if I didn't see that in their seventh house, I would still personally opt to look at their seventh house because in my eyes, that's not like a real union, if that makes sense, okay? So seventh house in astrology represents the first marriage and the spouse of that individual. So in a previous video that I made, I spoke about the fifth house and how that represents people that you will only date and never marry. Well, if you want to know who you will be with, you want to look at the seventh house. Equally, the seventh house is one of the places, not the only place, that you can see whether the person might get divorced, right? So if someone asks, will they get divorced? You can look at the seventh house to find out what will happen with that person's first marriage, right? And so the seventh house, you want to look at what sign or signs fall into the seventh house. What planets fall into the seventh house. And yes, you do need to know your birth time for this. What degree does the seventh house begin in? Where are the ruling planets of the seventh house? So for example, if the person's seventh house begins in Leo or is in Leo, where's the sun in their chart? That will begin to tell you a deeper story. So let's say the person's seventh house is in Leo, right? Leo can represent parties, right? It could represent maybe going out somewhere. Could even represent somewhere that you would go that's warm, or a major city, right? Like a well-known city. Could even represent maybe summer holidays. So if the person's seventh house is in Leo, you equally want to look at where is the sun. So if the sun is in Capricorn, that will give you more information. So it could be that it's an older person, right? Sometimes I've seen with Capricorn that it could equally mean a much younger person, just so that you know, in my experience. But it could mean that they meet an older person on vacation, Leo, or in a famous or well-known city, Leo, right? And this is important to know because if someone came to me and they said, you know, I'm looking at moving to this famous city, I would say to them, that makes sense because your seventh house is in Leo, right? And they said, oh, I've always had a feeling that my spouse or my long-term partner was there. I would say, yeah, do it. That makes sense. Let's say someone's seventh house is in Sagittarius, well, their spouse will be foreign, absolutely, right? They might meet them in a foreign country traveling. It could just mean that they meet them in their own country, but they are foreign or of a different culture, let's say. Let's say their 7th house is in Taurus. Could mean that their spouse is either voluptuous or overweight, or maybe they're very beautiful, or maybe they love to cook, right? So when you look at the 7th house and you look at the sign in the house, and then as step 1, so even if you just look at the 7th house and the sign or signs that are in the 7th house, you're doing great. And the planets that are in the 7th house, you're doing great. If you don't have planets in the 7th house, it does not matter, right? Because you still have the sign in there, and you still have the ruler of that sign that you need to look at, if that makes sense. So what questions do you have about this? Does this make sense to you? I really hope I kept it simple enough for you to understand. And like I said before, even if you just look at the sign that the 7th house is in, you're still starting to move into the direction of more advanced astrology and get a better understanding. And equally, astrology is advanced, right? I'm constantly learning in astrology. So if you feel like, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to understand all this? It's okay. Just learn and be with what you know right now and gain those insights. And as time goes on, you'll gain more and you'll benefit from that too. So where's your 7th house, my loves? And if you're married, tell me, where's your 7th house and how is that represented in your spouse? I really, really want to know. Again, 7th house is the first marriage, okay? If someone's been married multiple times, you do not look at the 7th house for that partner. What questions do you have? And whether it's day or night, you know, I love you, I love you, I love you. Thank you so much for watching.